Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low magazine? Because 4Low magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us today on Conversations with Big Rich. We are interviewing Jeff Mello, one of the OG rock crawling competitors. Did a lot of racing before that, I believe tough truck and some other things, and been a longtime off-road enthusiast. So welcome, Jeff, to Conversations with Big Rich. We want to find out about Jeff Mello and who you really are and how'd you get started. So let's start there. Where did you grow up?
Well, thanks for having me on. I grew up within 5 miles of where I'm sitting right now. I was born in Alamo, California. My parents lived in Danville, California, and I kind of lived in Danville between those two properties right now. So I've really never moved more than about 5 miles away.
Excellent. Was your family into wheeling when you were growing up?
So that basically started out. My dad's side of the family was big into race cars, midgets, Indianapolis, and always had a hot rod side to everything. They were very close. My dad and my uncle sprayed cars for the Oakland Roadster Show and stuff like that in the barn at my grandfather's ranch. And they had stripers that incidentally Jason Shear later moved into that striper's shop on Front Street in Danville, just by coincidence. But they were big into hot rods, and my dad sort of, I guess, in sprint cars, and my dad was sort of, I guess, black sheep. He never was real competitive. So when my dad was 9 years old, one of my grandfather's good friends that kind of had a neighboring ranch bought a 1946 CJ2, which is in my garage right now. The only vehicle kept inside the garage, right? Ever.
The oldest one.
Yeah, and so it was a very good friend of my grandfather's, and both their sons were the same. So all the hills and dales and ranches and ditches and Mount Abbott State Park, that little flat fender's been all over all those places. So that was his first taste of Jeeps. So my first Jeep trip was somewhere around late summer to fall of 1966. And that was in a Willys wagon that my dad had built up from 2 different ones. And then come 1967, February 1967, he bought a brand new real Jeep, right? His first real Jeep was a CJ5 President Red that he bought from Butler County, still in my mom's side yard now. That was February 67, and then a couple months later, I was born. And then my first trip was a couple, weeks after that, and they wheeled, like twice a month for all of my growing up life.
Excellent. And when was your first trip on the Rubicon?
I remember I was pretty young. It probably would have been like 6 weeks old, 7 weeks old, something like that.
Wow. That's excellent.
Yeah. So if anybody doesn't know where Danville is, we're, 2.5, 3 hours, the Rubicon, about 5 hours north of Pismo Beach. We're, Fordyce right up there. So very, very NorCal oriented, most of my wheeling in my early years. But we did go on, my dad was post office. So we would go on these grand 3-week long vacations, family of 4 with a dog sometimes, in a CJ5 towing a tent trailer, right? We would go to Colorado. We went up as high as Calgary and Banff, Canada, in a CJ5 with other Jeeps and towing tent trailers. So we would do, we did Black Bear Road, we did Imogene Pass, and all the Silverton stuff. We went up, did watch some competition stuff and screw around in Canada. Long trips. And in the meantime, you're stopping at different places along the way. Sand dunes in Nevada, you'd camp there for a couple nights and play. And they were awesome adventures.
That's great. So it was natural that you, of course, got into Jeeping, four-wheel drive, off-road. What was your first vehicle?
My first vehicle was a 66 CJ5 that was nearly identical to my dad's CJ7, but my grandfather on my mom's side now bought that Jeep in late 67 after my dad got his brand new. So it was about a year old. It's sitting out in my backyard with some Mog axles underneath it. Hasn't been finished since 20 years ago now. Yeah. Keep them, and they're all sentimental. Like, I'm one of those guys that has instant sentimental value. I found this old Commando racer on Craigslist, right? And I'm studying this thing. I found it in the 70s and 80s and Mint 400 and Baja 500 and all this stuff. And I'm like, it's still in the same trim, and I like have instant sentimental value to it. And I haven't touched it. I haven't turned one nut on it or anything. So I'm going to build that one up for Nora, I think.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
That's great. So when did you meet your wife, Julie?
I met my wife in like late 90s, and she was roommates with a real good friend of mine and my best man that was one of the other guys in my life that had Jeeps since we were a team, and Matt Kinney. And he's so yeah, they were hanging out together and just ended up meeting my wife. And our second date was a mud drag and barrel race up at Prairie City, Sacramento, and put on by California Association of Four-Wheel Drive Clubs. And I thought, I got my open top 66 that we drove up there. I'm pretty sure we would trailer up my mud tires and switch them all there, and I'd pull the top and the doors and the passenger seat and the tailgate and all the nothing you had to unbolt, even windshield off, and I would go run a couple different classes of mud drags. And then they had a barrel race. So everybody was running the barrel race in the mud, and I think I won them all that year, so I was pretty dialed in. And I just, you run individually. So I got out of the thing, and I second date, I said, well, do you want to try and drive it? She never even sat in the passenger in the driver's seat of the thing. And I'm like 13, 14 seconds ahead of the fastest guy in his own truck. And, would you like to, try it? I didn't think for any way she was going to jump in the thing. So we jumped in the thing and runs out there. She says she backpedaled because she wanted a third date, but she was within like a second or two of my time. I'm like, all right. So yeah, she's got the competitive spirit too.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So then the mud drags or the barrel racing there, was that the first competitions you got into, or did you have a competitive spirit?
I mean, when I was 9, I built a bike because some of the kids in my neighborhood were into BMX. So I built up a bike and I went and raced that a couple times. And my dad was never competitive at all. We did all the recreational wheeling and everything. We went and watched a couple of competitions and, like all the racing in the other side of his family. But I definitely have the competitive bug. And yeah, the Sacramento Sand Champions originally started those mud drags. And my very first mud drag, I can't remember what year it was, I went up there and I the trophy out of it. Literally ran out of gas. This is pretty typical for me too. On my parade lap back after my last heat to get my trophy. I didn't make it. So that started I still have that trophy and it still has the mud on it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I would imagine if you were competing in them and you grew up in them, you were doing a lot of your own work on them.
Yeah. Well, nobody else going to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. My dad was super handy. My dad taught me everything automotive and everything, construction and remodel, which I did for many years. He was the kind of guy that never hired anything out. I think the only thing he ever hired out was somebody to do his roof, and it leaked, his whole life. And so he taught me all that. He worked for the post office and then later, had laundromats, which we still have. But he taught me all that stuff, and then a lot of it I was able to, just excel. I would collect tools and space, and had a barn to work in, and eventually, and all that. So yeah, I was always making my own stuff, but everybody was back then. You could get Casey Whitney parts, but didn't know.
OEM replacement parts.
Yeah, and there was some guy named like Smitty building stuff down in Southern Cal, but that's
chrome bumpers. So what was your first experience rock crawling?
Well, I mean, it wasn't called rock crawling, right?
Well, no, I mean, I know you were trail wheeling.
We knew it was going to become competitive from back in the 80s. We would sit on the trail and, with open diffs and dumpster dive, true track tires, and we would play who could go furthest in two-wheel drive. You could make it to like middle little sluice box and two-wheel drive back in the day, and then we'd have to lock in the hubs and finish the trail. But all of a sudden, all these guys started coming up, and they had lockers, and they were putting Detroit lockers in and stuff. So we knew it was getting really weird and competitive. We're like, "What are you doing? We're going the same place you are. What are you spending all this money for?" We didn't get it. We talked about it around the campfire. Oh, somebody's going to put out some cones on Little Sluice and have a scoring system. And sure enough, Bob Hazel did that, right, in 1998. You had to really be somebody to be invited to that first ever Warren Nationals, and I certainly wasn't. So I didn't hear anything about it. Guys like Curry's built a whole Jeep, a competitive rock crawling TJ in 98. TJ's didn't come out since 90 till 97. And they had this brand new Jeep that they had just constructed just for competitive rock crawling. And there hadn't been a competitive rock crawling yet. I'm like, geez, and then guys like Yoder, and he was just so badass. Everybody knew him just from running the trails up out of NorCal. He got the invite. So that, guys like that's who impresses me, that competed against guys like Curry.
Right.
So I petitioned pretty hard to be known, I guess, for the next year. And it was 99 Warren Nationals. And I mean, it was growing so fast. I think there was other rock crawls in between, but this was the only second Warren Nationals. It was in Johnson Valley. So they had a list of requirements. You had to have a winch. You had to have 35-inch tires. You had to have lockers front and rear. I never had a winch before. I had never had 35-inch tires before. I'd never had a limited slip before, right? I had ran her thicker gear oil was about as close as I could get. So my wife had bought her first CJ7, and we had already done a spring over on it. And I said, I want to go do that. So we got accepted, and then I bought lockers and 35 and built my own bead locks and on a winch. We went out there, but you got to remember the time, the era. There was already, 44-inch tire, rear wheel steers, snipers, and everything was named after a bug. There was like killer bees and scorpions and, all this stuff that, I mean, these guys were badass. And here we are, come up, and I'd never even turned on a locker before and driven a locker before. And one of the guys in my Jeep club towed me down there, and he spotted for me. And I think the first day we didn't see the same line at all. He probably had really good lines. I probably had really good lines. We ended up in the middle of them somewhere, screwed up. And the second day we kind of worked it out pretty well, and did, for what we were driving, we did pretty well, but not enough to make the 30 dozen back then. It was what you wanted to be go out for the third day.
Yes. I remember hearing back in the day or talking to you, and you'd done some tough truck racing.
Yeah.
But that was prior to the rock crawling competitions.
It was more concurrent than you realize. So,
really?
Yeah. Like all the Monster Jam shows and all that stuff had televised, and they all had tough trucks. They called them pro arena trucks, which your knuckles were 3 inches off the ground. But it was the same thing. So they had a pretty good televised USA Motorsports version of it. And I'm sitting on my couch watching this going, man, that's cool. And it ended up being a couple guys that I had mud dragged with were doing real well in it and stuff. And they traveled all over the United States with this televised program. And I looked at them, I go, I bet you I could build something that would do that, right? And that would be a blast. So a gal gave me a no smog full-size Cherokee. And I basically chopped that all up, moved all the stock parts around, and set a CJ5 body down on it. And I went out pro arena racing, and that was in '98 that I finished building that. It was $2,267, that Jeep. We eventually won over $40,000 in purse money with that Jeep. It became, $5,000 Jeep. Don't get me wrong. We didn't, we added some parts here and there. And my buddy, Matt Kenny, still owns that Jeep, and we still compete with it. I have another one similar to it. He's won a couple championships and won a trailer up at CalRocs Racing in the pre-runner class.
Excellent.
Yeah. Super fun.
Yeah, I remember, Matt, you guys came out all to the to that first year that I put on CalRocs. There was quite a few of you guys from Diablo, Wheelers, or what was the name of your club?
Costa Jeepers, and we're a spin-off in 1966 of the Diablo four-wheeler. Yeah.
Okay.
Both local clubs. And so we, at the time, we were a spin-off that wanted to do more hardcore trails, right? So our club didn't allow anything over a 90-inch wheelbase at the time. Right? So CJ7s, when they came out, I remember the old guys when CJ7s came out, and I'm whatever, like 9 years old, going, oh, look at that huge thing. That'll never fit on the trail. And rightfully so. The Jeep had never grown that. It's 40 years or 30 years or whatever of a Jeep, and it had only grown a couple of inches and, 4 when they put a straight 6 in it. And people weren't lifting them and all that. So 9 inches to add to the already biggest Jeep out there was a huge step. And eventually, naturally, that came.
Right.
But that's kind of a defining era for like the very clear eras that I see anyway, from my perspective, of how four-wheeling came. There's like 5 very clear eras that brought us up to what we are.
You and Matt campaigned the stadium truck, and then you got into the rock crawling as well. You came out, started competing at the CalRocs events, and I remember the Jeep that you had, I think it was aluminum body, correct?
It wasn't yet at your first Lake Amador show, and that was
right.
That was a good event. I remember that. I mean, it was fun, and it was all one class, if I remember right. We didn't have classes back then, so it was my wife's same CJ7. It was kind of like a russet red color.
Okay.
I remember Durham, being there, not even realized at the time, like some of these guys that you read about in the magazines, and how he came from North Carolina to be at that show. That was pretty awesome.
Yes.
So, and I don't remember half the other guys that were there, but yeah, I mean, that was back in the day, and we're competing in the CJ7. That's still our trail Jeep. That's still our, it's still totally street legal today. It's still totally street legal. And we had the race Jeep that we're traveling all over the West, at least, doing them both at the same time. In fact, during the early years, there was an event we trailered both of them down to Johnson Valley, and we wheeled all day. It was a 2-day event. We wheeled all day, came back, loaded up the CJ. We drove down to Indio and unloaded them and raced the race Jeep. Me and my spotter both raced the race Jeep in the pro arena race, got first and second, and then loaded back up and came back on Sunday and finished out the rock crawl. The second day was awesome weekend.
That's great.
Yeah, we were hitting it pretty hard. We were doing like what we considered 75 days on dirt, Jeep days on dirt. So somewhere some Jeep locked in, but if you brought 2 Jeeps to the same trail, that was 2 days worth, 2 days worth of maintenance too. So that was kind of at the heyday of it all.
That's pretty cool. So you had a lot of success in your career. You really participated for a long time in what we called the modified stock class. Yeah. And you had some innovative things that you were doing there, at least from things that I saw, Frenching the spring hangers in to get, a smoother base on it. Talk about some of the things that you did back then that were kind of out of the box.
Well, I never thought anything that we were doing was super out of the box. What we were fighting with the most, like I was stoked when the stock modified class came, right? Because I had 3 years of racing against everybody, and they were all the next year their Jeep would show up back half with 60s and all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, I changed the air in the tires, and that's about it. And so I was kind of like, hey, this isn't going to last very long. It's fun, and then the stock modified came out, and we fit in like a mitten. It was, it started out, everybody had to show up with a windshield, and you had to have like type suspension, and it got changed back and forth throughout all the years. But the hardest part, I think, was keeping up with running your shows, right? So I'm running CalRocs, ProRock, and UROC at one point, and 3 different rule books, and you had to make sure you were class legal in all 3 of those rule books, and yet make sure you were still competitive. To do all that was difficult. So I don't think we got super innovative. Yeah, we French leaf springs, but they were off the shelf leaf springs. We did some, we ran propane for a while. I think that for a while there was a light type motor that you had to run in one of the series. You had to run it. I think it was the same brand motor that came in the Jeep.
Right.
So I was running the AMC 360s, and really nobody had a fuel injection for them. I'm sure if you were smart enough, you could have built one, but I'm like, what am I allowed to do here? Oh, propane. That works good upside down. And we ran that for a lot of years. And then the reason we took it out was because we took that same Jeep in '08, we took it on Ultimate Adventure with Peterson's 4-wheel and all that, like 5 states and 1,500 miles on the road. And you had to make it from gas station to gas station and be able to get gas. So we put in the Howell fuel injection, but it was the same year that people were talking online about, oh, you can't compete anymore in CalRocs, even in stock class, in a street Jeep. I said, well, I kind of think you can. So we went out. So the same year we did five states and 1,500 miles in the street Jeep, we won CalRocs stock modified class. And that was I really wanted to do that bad, and it worked out. So that's cool.
So we always had an interesting relationship, you and I. It's always been friendly, but also a little contentious at times. I can remember you'd always show up at the events like just minutes before the end of tech, and you never wanted to unload the Jeep off of the trailer so that I could tech it. I always had to climb up into the trailer, and
it's not like an enclosed, yeah.
Well, yeah, but still up onto a trailer. But it was always, I was always like, oh, somebody would say, hey, Mello's not here yet. And I'm like, oh, because he's waiting until the end of tech so he doesn't have to unload the Jeep.
Yep.
And you'd come cruising in at like 2 minutes before the end of tech.
And you probably thought I was doing that just to piss you off, and I thought you were probably trying to make me take it off the trailer. Then I did. You think about it, you do it 1,000 times a year, right. And then when you have 2-car trailer and you're doing 2 Jeeps, you're just like, oh, what can you not see? And at this point, I'm thinking, we have a relationship. We've been doing this for a long time. You've never found anything wrong with my car on tech, and yet why? So why do you even have to tech me? And so yeah, we had the thing. But I mean, I was showing up late because I was working, paying the bills, and then jumping in the truck. And don't think of it as anything against you.
Oh no,
you were in California running CalRocs, except for one event we'll talk about later. I mean, I'm 18 hours away from Farmington, New Mexico, right? We raced in Farmington, New Mexico 6 times one year. We competed.
Wow.
And we would show up, we would leave here 18 hours and 3 minutes before tech closed on the hammer, just because that was it. You were working on the Jeep, or you were working to pay the bills to even get to go do that. We were pushing it so hard. So we didn't have the luxury of up early and, hanging out and all that stuff. We were pushing.
Let's talk about some of the events and some of the stories from those. I don't know all the stories from the events because I was really busy with something and, dealing with something else. Like at that Amador event, during tech, I was in court in Jackson fighting a cease and desist order from the county so that event could even go on.
Yeah, the show that almost never started.
Yes,
but
correct.
One thing about tech before we forget about it, one of the contentious parts between us that I think we both found out about later on, because I don't think you personally were doing tech, but you had changed a rule we bumped up and I had a buggy
Pro mod.
Pro mod class, which again, it was called Pro mod for you, and then it was UROC Legends, and then it was, so we're trying to keep this dang car not only running, but legal for all these different things. And you had a three-dimensional body panel rule that popped up one year, and I'm like, what does this even mean? It's a Jeep. It's two-dimensional to begin with, But there were, I guess, guys pushing too far, trying to, say, oh, it's a car. It's not for Pro Mod. It's not a. So you wanted us to have like a rolled top edge to the Jeep, like the Jeep has, and I didn't have it, and I didn't have any time to do it. So we actually fabricated some pieces one time, but I think they got ripped off, and we went last minute tech to the last one, and I didn't even have enough money to buy body panels. But years earlier, we had ripped the old Doughboy pool off at my grandmother's house, and I took the sides of the Doughboy pool, which were like a wood grain, and it was like corrugated about as much as cardboard is corrugated, and it wasn't even me that took it to tech, but somebody says, well, you don't have 3D body panels, and one of the guys that was helping me out at the time goes, hell, I don't. Look at they're corrugated. That's three-dimensional.
I remember.
Check. And then so I heard about it, and probably you heard about it like months later. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's funny.
It was. That's it. Yeah, those were some fun times.
And there was another one with steering that I swear to God somebody must have told you what it was I was building, because I had really cool steering for the Pro Mod class. Because you required something like steering box on the frame and mechanical linkage that would operate the wheels. And somebody else required, I can't remember what it was, but UROC or somebody required something similar but different. So I had a Ross box down at the bottom of the steering column, a full hydraulic system, and then I had a Ross box down at the steering column that ran a drag link that went forward and went off the knuckles. So and it was like 99% all built and full hydraulic other than that. But it would satisfy the box on the frame. It would satisfy all of the rules. And if you turn the steering wheel very gingerly, it would turn the wheels. You weren't going anywhere on that system, but it satisfied the rule book. And last minute, like, I'm ready for this, right? And I'm going to kill CalRocs now because I've got this system set up. And last minute, you said, oh, everybody can run full hydraulic. I'm like, oh, you're killing me, right? Jesus. And I don't even know if you ever knew about that, but I quizzed my guys. I'm like, who told?
No, I didn't. It was just getting to the point that the courses were demanding we change the rule there if we were going to keep people running, and finishing courses. So
yeah,
there was one time we were all up in, I think it was a UROC. Yeah, it was a UROC event up in Vernal. We were getting ready to go to Moab, me and Little Rich and a couple of the guys. You had said I could borrow your comp Jeep. It was for Easter Jeep Safari. So I was taking it from Vernal down to Easter Jeep, and then it was going to get back to you before you had to be
CalRocs event. Yeah,
CalRocs event. Little Rich and I took it to Moab. We did some really cool stuff with it.
Yeah.
It's this story leads into the only time you ever lied to me that I know of, and you told me I was kind of worried about it and about hurting the Jeep, and you told me, oh, don't worry about it. There's nothing you can do that can hurt this Jeep. So we took it out and we did Pritchett. We did Proving Grounds, which is just 5 huge waterfalls. We did Moab Rim. Rich did a lot of driving. I did some driving. We got to Proving Grounds, and we were with Schaefer and
Trail, by the way, that I would
Clifford.
never take that Jeep on.
Well, Kathy Crook was with us too, you know.
Yeah.
So she had her. So she had her Jeep. So we go up there. We didn't do the very first obstacle of that because it was just some stupid. I mean, it was so vertical that the short wheelbase vehicles weren't going to do it. We decided not to do that. We went around that one, but the rest were the waterfalls. I drove the first three waterfalls, those three waterfalls. I actually was in the crack line, turned into the one, and it rolled back onto its cage, but you're in a narrow V like this, trying to climb one side, and you had to turn into it and go up. I just kind of laid it back onto the cage, and Schaefer's like, here, let me put a winch line on. I said, I think I got this. And I put it into reverse, brought the front end down, and then went ahead and drove the waterfall. We get up to the next one, which is one that I think at that time, nobody had driven it unassisted. It was maybe Charlie Copesy was like the first one to ever do it, and maybe he had done it already. But this thing's like 20 foot tall. I don't know how anybody ever drove that thing because it was sheer vertical, but there was a crack in it. And so everybody winched it. So Little Rich got into it. We winched up and over. I got started driving again, and I had the guy riding with me that was from T-Max Winches, a young guy. And he was on the trail ride with us at that time because they'd come on as a marketing partner for CalRocs. And so I was, just showing him Moab and hanging out with everybody and stuff. And so we're driving out, and it's pretty easy trail there. And then there's a series of 3 steps back into the parking lot where all the trailers and everything is at. We go down that, and I look at that, and I'm like, that's pretty damn steep. Everybody in the buggies is just dropping right off, right? So I look at the kid, and I said, okay, this is what's going to happen. The front end's going to get really light, and I'm going to hit the throttle, and we're just going to drive out of it. And he goes, okay, great. So I'm on the cutting brake on the rear. I think I was in front wheel drive only, but we start to pull down, we're sliding down the hill, get to the bottom, it starts to stand up, and I hit the gas. Well, it was what I thought was the gas. We hit that ledge. I was standing on the gas, I thought, and nothing happened. Well, I guess I was standing on the brake. And so we went over. And then we went over again because those 3 ledges. Then we went over again and twisted. And so I always tell everybody I did a 2.5 with a McTwist at the bottom.
Yeah.
And we're on our side. We're under, we're at the bottom of the hill now. I'm like, oh my God, what just hit me? Well, you had spare axles underneath the seat.
That's right.
Okay. And we had the propane tank in there because you were running propane at the time. And the spare propane tank, we had just ratchet strapped it in with 2 huge trailer ratchet straps so it wouldn't go anywhere. I mean, nobody could pull that thing out. Well, the amount of forces from a rollover are much greater than any strong man is. Right. And so I ended up getting hit. The kid that was with me was fine, but I got hit like the back of the head, the front of the head, plus smacking my head on the ground because the axles, the propane tank, and my screw up.
I probably shouldn't be smiling right now.
So I'm sitting there. We upright the vehicle. I got blood coming down my face and everything, and I'm like, oh my God, I've just destroyed your Jeep, right? And the front grill is pushed in, the hood is busted. I'm like, the fan is into the radiator, and I'm like, oh my God, now we got to get this thing back on the trailer, and then we got to get it fixed so that we can, at least drivable, and then we got to get it back to Jeff right away, not when we planned on coming back, but right away because now it needs to be fixed. So that's what we did. We got it, we pulled the grill out. We did some work on the radiator. I don't remember if we replaced the radiator or if we just got it pinched off or whatever. I know I got a hood from Campbell, one of the fiberglass hoods from him, and that they were producing. I called you up. I remember saying, hey, Jeff, I didn't appreciate you lying to me. And you go, what do you mean? I never lied to you. And I said, yeah, you told me I couldn't hurt your Jeep. And you went,
I think the exact statement was, Rich, you can't hurt it and it won't hurt you.
right.
Both were lies.
Yeah, I kicked its ass, but boy, it kicked my ass too. And it was funny because that was the same weekend, in fact, the same day that Ron Stobaugh had rolled, I think it was the Superior, or maybe it was the alloy axle Jeep that he had then, off of the top of Potato Salad Hill.
Oh, yeah.
And he'd rolled it there and got messed up. So he was, concussioned. I was concussioned. We both had Jeeps that were screwed up. At least he screwed up his Jeep instead of me screwing up yours.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, so I remember Bill Kreitzel, we made arrangements with Bill to take your Jeep back
Yeah.
to you. And I don't know how you guys met up and got that done, but I was really worried about that you weren't going to make it to the next event. I was on my way to Disney, Oklahoma. So we had Bill Kreitzel's car with us.
So somebody else let you take their Jeep after that, huh?
Yeah, but I couldn't fit into the buggy anyway, because, old fat man.
It just went for a trailer ride.
It went for a trailer ride, and Little Rich drove it.
Yeah.
And he used it while we were messing around and stuff. And of course, he didn't hurt it. But I remember you sending me the bill for that, and it was like $700 and some odd, and I'm like, this can't be right. It's got to be more than that. When I called you up, you said, no, that's all. You just paid for the party, all the beer and steaks is what you told me.
I think you'd already sent a radiator my way and the hood, and so then it was like I think we threw some tube in there to retube the cage. So the extension of that story is, you did the right thing. You got it back to me in time to get this thing, but I mean the frame was bent, everything. I had another dead stock CJ7, and I had two good straight flat slabs, right? So the Jeep is parked in the barn, one vehicle shop, and the other stock CJ7 is parked on the driveway, and I've got chalk marks and everything down on the ground and lines, and I'm running back and forth taking tape measurements, and I got this big I-beam that goes underneath the frame, and then bottle jacks and chains to tweak the frame back and do this and get it all. And I think it's still a little bent, but and it had the Aqualoo body on it, right? So that was one of 70 times that Aqualoo body's been rolled. And that was right after, I think, at the end of our purple phase from the sponsor, and I had already flipped that configuration with the purple roll cage. I was at Supercrawl, which didn't have stock class the first year, in the Legends class, running an unlimited line, bonus line, with my spotter for extra points. Lance Clifford's the one that said, oh, just run right up that thing in second gear. Just keep your tire out of that hole. Well, I didn't keep my tire out of the hole, so we went backwards off the high dive and landed on that cage, and the cage had only gone to the Aqualoo body, the dashboard, at that time. And that was yours was the second crash that, I'm just happy you weren't more hurt. Everything happened to your head, so pretty solid there. And the Jeep can be fixed, right? So yeah, we got it back, got the frame straightened, cut the whole cage out of it, and built the cage just in time to get to the last CalRocs event. This is what I was more pissed about. So I have this brand new cage, didn't even get paint on it, this Jeep that runs, and here I am. I need to get to the last CalRocs event that I'm winning that year, and I can pretty much show up to the last event and have enough points to win the championship. And I live in the middle of California. You can't take more than about 6.5 hours to get to any point in California that I'm at. And you had a CalRocs event in Beatty, Nevada. And I'm like, where is that? Other side of the mountains and no road to get there. So it was like a 12-hour drive or something to get to this damn last CalRocs event. So me and Yoder cruise out there. I remember we won the event, but I remember it was the hardest rock in the world. When he would stack it, you could hear it ring. It had so much iron in it. and it was the heaviest rock in the world. And like half the lines just had you going like this against a wall or in a V crack that you could fall into or something like that. And I remember coming home, we had won the thing and we'd won the championship and everything. And my dad looks at the Jeep before it was ever even off the trailer, and we had fixed it all back up, new fenders, new hood, you know, all this new cage and all this stuff. And he looks at me and he goes, "I thought you said you won." It looked like it got wrecked all over again. I said, "We did." Rough, man. Like,
that was really
brutal,
hard rock out there. I remember everybody's cage was gouged.
yeah.
I mean, when you can take caging like that and you just barely touch a rock and you're gouging, the rocks didn't break.
And it really didn't ring. You could throw a rock down and ding, like you set down a tuning fork or something.
We broke a lot of axles.
Places, yeah, I broke an axle there. It was one of Jason Shearer's that I borrowed. How many places did you take us that we never got to go back to for one reason or another? A lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of them,
remember you were just finding places.
Some of that was I didn't want to go back. You know, we would go there and it was either too hard to get spectators, it was too hard to get, you know, it was just too hard to work the area.
One of them
properly.
Was right?
Moon Rocks was one of those that I loved.
Yeah.
You know, the open area that's there outside of Reno, but I used it once, Ranch Pratt used it once, and then they took it away from us.
Yeah.
BLM said, "Nope, you can't use it anymore." And that's when I was running Vora at the same time. And so we had that spot. We did Vernal. We didn't go back there because dealing with the state of Utah was
what was the one that was down the Mexican border? Like, I'm not even sure what side of the wall we were competing on, if there were one.
Oh yeah, that was down in Boulevard up off a high Interstate 8 coming out of San Diego. That was an interesting one because we had the Border Patrol and helicopters and everything show up when we were looking at the piece of property to try to find what area of rocks we were going to use. And I mean, they swooped in on us with trucks and helicopters and stuff because we had triggered one of their ground sensors.
I remember Jody Everding being pretty nervous down there. I thought they were going to deport him.
But we had people come through that were jumping the fence because there was really no fence there. The border, I mean, there was railroad tracks up at the far end on the border of his property, or came through the edge of his property, and like 20 feet past the railroad tracks was Mexico.
Yeah.
So there was all sorts of guys. You could tell who they were because they were all carrying 1-gallon milk jugs full of water.
Yeah.
You know, and they stopped and bought food at the hot dog vendor and stuff like that. But, you know, the property owner would come up and yell at him in Spanish to leave because he wouldn't let the Border Patrol onto his property. He saw him coming in, he'd shoot down from the house and tell him, "Nope, you can't be on the property." There was signs out front, you know, Border Patrol, you're not allowed here, that kind of thing. He was really, really a private individual. But that was a really cool area too.
It was neat. I thought digging holes with the tires were gonna like get arrested for tunneling or something. Yeah. It was gnarly.
Tell us about after your rock crawling career there, competitive rock crawling. I know that you raced a couple of years, I think, with Ultra 4 or King of the Hammers.
Yes. Yeah. Dave invited me down for the first one, and you know, the OG 13 one, and I'm like, "Hey Dave, I would love to." That's like 8 hours and a bunch of dollars, and I have other commitments with sponsors. At the time, we were running the buggy and the CJ, so we were doing 2 classes. There was a whole bunch of events that it was super fun. I'd go to with 2 different spotters and 2 different buggies and unload them, and I had a group of great guys that were helping me keep up with all this maintenance and stuff, and working, you know, for a t-shirt and a meal, hot meal and some beers. And we were running hard, man. We'd show up to these events, and some of them I would never even see the courses. I'd run from the buggy over, and I'd jump in and belt into the CJ. And my spotter would go, come on up here. Like, you know, the guys waiting for us and get pissed and stuff. One of those was it Coloma, whatever, where gold was found up there.
Yep.
Like 108 degrees that day. Oh my God, we must have sweat out more money. And I would go and I would break one of them and I'd just run away from it. And I'd go run the other one and, you know, break it. And I met like 2 people because I'd come back to my junk and they were working on them. I'm like, oh, God. And they're this deep into working on my stuff just to watch me be an idiot, I guess. So we were hitting it pretty hard and heavy. So we didn't make the first King of the Hammers, but we were there in 08. I didn't want to camp at Johnson Valley in a tent, and I didn't have a camper. So I called up a guy I knew that was the only guy that had an enclosed, and I said, Jason, you want to go to King of the Hammers with me? And this is going to be awesome. And I had been doing the rock race, and I had been doing the XRA and some stuff around in the buggy, because we had a V8 in it by then and everything. So I thought this would be fun. And he had Tiny at the time. So he's all, no, you know, dude, I'm really just into the picking apart the puzzle, and I love the crawling and and all this stuff. I said, you know, I've known the kid since he was 18. I'm like, I think he'll like it. Come on down. I really just wanted a place to stay. Turns out, of course, he's going to be the best co-dawg ever, right? So we go down there and we come out of there and he's hooked, right? I think we broke his truck on the drive. I can't remember if it was that year or the next. No, it was that year. We broke his truck turning around at Boone Road and stuck in the sand because we missed Boone Road. We had Brian Whitford haul my flatbed trailer down empty, and then we hauled Jason's big trailer to Mustard Dog's house, and can't think of his name right now, lived right next to Mustard Dog.
John James,
thank you. And he stored it while we loaded up Jason's truck and towed it back with Brian's truck, only there was too many guys. There was 5 guys in Brian's truck. So me and Jay rode in Jason's truck on my trailer back from the Hammers, like 8 hours. Back with the windshield wipers going and the stereo and everything. It was funny.
That's kind of like the ultimate e-ticket ride, because even though, you know, you're sitting up higher than they are,
oh yeah,
you know, and you have like no control. So, you know, as a co-driver, at least you can turn and, you know, smack the driver if he's being stupid. But if you're sitting on the trailer in the truck,
I felt like I was in that movie Memphis Belle, because Brian's truck and his big exhaust, you know, black smoke coming out every time he's on the gas, and the boards in my trailer going clatter, 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 clatter this whole time. And I'm thinking, man, this doesn't feel right. It was what you did.
Yeah.
But Jason, you know, Jason's on the phone ordering parts, and he's hooked. He's going to be there next year for sure. So he's talking to Campbell and, you know, getting transfer cases delivered, I think, by the time we got home. And he built that next Pro Mod car, which I told him not to do, for the record. I said, no, build a car just for one thing. Oh, no, I think we can do both. No, I'm going to sell Tiny. I'm going to, you know, so that lasted about 2 competitions. He went out Pro Mod rock crawling with it, and it really wasn't set up that well for that. So then Schaefer tore it all back apart for the next year. But yeah, that was fun because we built Jay's first car, and Lance came down from Pirate, right? So Lance time-lapse filmed a 1-week build at Campbell's shop down there to build that car that Jay won in 09. And that was a fast car. It still is a fast car. And then, you know, that was kind of the end of me being able to teach Jason Shear or anything. It's just like nowadays, it's like, oh my God. But so that's my claim to KOH fame, is that
you got Jason Shearer hooked.
co-dawg, yeah. We broke, but you could chase on course. So we had a guy, Brad Thomas, bring my backpack welder up on a dirt bike to the top of sledge, and we welded the thing back together. Well, I thought I ran over Jason because he's, you know, there's no steering in the Ram, and he's saying move to line up parts. He's saying move forward, move back, turn this way, turn that way. And I did something wrong. And I hear this, he jumps out of the way and I hear this pop. And I'm like, oh man, I just ran over his ankle or something. And he's like, oh, laying down on the rocks. And I'm like, what? He's like, you ran over my catheter when I jumped out of the way. So he got the wrist rocket to the junk right up his pant leg. and then we spent 20 minutes laughing. And then we fixed the Jeep and made it didn't blast, I think. So, yeah.
That's a great.
So, yeah, I lasted about 3 more years, going to actual King of the Hammers. And, again, it's before they changed classes or had multiple classes. And I'm like, this is, it's awesome. It's fun. I wish I could do it all the time. But it instantly got way out of my budget to where, and I only want to go if I think I can be competitive. I don't have to actually be, but I have to think I can be.
Right.
So, and then when stock modified came around, or what he called stock modified
The
class,
600, yeah.
Whatever. Yeah, I mean, it was before they all had numbers. Even he just had every man. I don't know. I must have got 100 calls, from people. Oh, you have a stock modified class. You got to come out and run it. It's, no. Some blue chip company is going to get an LJ. I looked at the rule book, right? Some blue chip company is going to get an LJ, put a stroker 6 in it, and every legal part you can, it's going to be a $50,000 car, and they're going to win that. And I was wrong. It was 2 blue chip companies, Savvy and Curry, did it and blew doors on that class for whatever 3 or 4 years, and it just that wasn't in the cards for me.
Yeah.
So I go out there on leaf springs and bounce around for no reason.
So I kind of lost track of you there for a while because I moved out of California. I met Shelly. We went on the road full time in 2011 and been living, on the road, just that Bedouin lifestyle, putting on rock crawls and the dirt riot races. I miss those days of sitting around at events with you. It was tough to see that. And then I'm up in Washington we'd already bought the magazine and we're doing an ambassador tour for the magazine for 4 Low. Tim Lund goes, well, Jeff Mello lives up here. And I'm like, what? I guess you have a second house or a place up there, but
Yeah.
You were there at the time, but we had laid out a time schedule and we were like there and then gone.
So yes,
Missed you there, but
slow down on the rock crawling and racing. There's money to buy a beach house. And so yeah, we have a place on Hood Canal up there, not too far from Tim. And yeah, you're welcome anytime you're up there in the area. We usually go up for the month of July and enjoy it. And it's a neat property. The house next door has been in my mom's side of the family, and her cousin owns it since the 30s.
wow.
And the whole area is kind of families that have been there that long. So it's really neat. We lucked out. Yeah.
So after the time at KOH, I know that you've stayed in touch and working with Jason and his racing, is from what I understand. What else have you been up to?
Well, I don't work with Jay as much as I'd like to. Partly that is just schedules and stuff like that. And partly I kind of go over there and I feel like I don't know enough to help him anymore. I do what I can, but he's taken everything so far to the next level and the next level that it's like, for me, I kind of don't get it. Where's the carburetor on this thing? And,
what are these chicken wings up there?
Well, I remember one time, well, it was your event. It was down in Globe, Arizona. Yoder and I are out there with my little V6 in the buggy, and we're setting the dwell. And he looks at me and he goes, how many people at a national any type of racing event right now do you think are setting well? Because that was my V6 out of my 66, my first Jeep, that was like what we had when we built the buggy, so that's what went in it. But so I mean, we did a little bit of toward the same era there. We did Baja a few times with Team Pirate and Schaefer's Jeep Speed car, and that was super fun because we got to win. and Pistol Pete, rest his soul, said we couldn't, and we did anyway. And he was a great guy. And then I got the opportunity to be on a couple of TV shows in the last few years. When we stopped rock crawling competitively so much, I had a second Pro Arena Jeep that was actually the reason I bought the double trailer. Because one of the early Farmington rock crawls, like I said, my wife Julie is awesome. She's a 2-time world national, or not world national, I guess, but national rock crawl, women's rock crawl champion, by the way. So one of the early Farmington, New Mexico rock crawls, I'm out there with her Jeep, and I can't remember what trailer we took out there, but I call her up, and she had driven the Pro Arena truck, like powder puff and stuff like that, a couple times. She kind of always beat the girls, but I didn't think much of it. I'm calling her on my 18-hour drive back, and I said, "Oh, how was your weekend, honey?" And she goes, "Oh, I went down to Fresno to race against all the guys that I normally race against, all the West Coast pros." "Oh, that's nice, honey. How'd you do and everything?" "Oh, I didn't beat Donnie Chester. I got second." I'm like, "You got second over a 3-day show? You got second overall?" She's like, "Yeah." So we were winning like an average of $400 per weekend when we would, which was decent, back then. If 400 is the average, especially, right? So
Yeah.
I don't remember how much she won. So I'm like, well, God, I got to build you your own Jeep. We got this 2 Jeep trailer anyway. So that was actually pretty early on, and I started building her a Pro Arena Jeep. Never finished it because we got so hot and heavy into the crawling. So when we slowed down, all my buddies were like, "Hey, let's finish this Jeep and we'll go race it up Prairie City in the short course stuff." And that's what we've been doing. So when I finished it, Casey Shear, I think, was the first driver, because I had shoulder surgery, so I wasn't going to bang my shoulder up driving it yet. And I kind of built it, everything's on a budget, and I wanted other people to be able to drive it. So we coined it the budget rental. I think it's had like 14 drivers now since I think we finished it in 2012 or 13, several wins. So, and about half the class in what they call it pre-runner class. And we don't do the rocks. We're just short course race. About half the class, I think, started out driving my Jeep and then went, "Hey, I gotta go build or buy my own." So that's kind of neat. Every now and then, Rob, the announcer, calls it, "All right, they got the Mello class coming out now." And I built a couple more and then sell them off. But I still have that original budget rental, and it's getting an LS in it right now. So
Excellent. I know that you participated in Truck Night in America,
yeah.
And that was were you in it the first year or the second year?
I was in it the first season.
Okay.
And I was the 3rd episode filmed and the second one they aired.
Okay.
And yeah, that was a blast. That was a really cool experience. Got to hang out with Pistol Pete, got to hang out with Bender, got to meet Abe Wine, and got to know Glenn Flake, who turns out grew up right around this area. And obviously I had seen him in the old Warren Miller films and all that stuff back in the day, but didn't know really who he was. Then the more you know about Glenn, the more you're impressed. You're like, wow, this guy is it.
He's legit.
He's not just still it at his age. He created it, in the 80s, and he's still it. He's cool. So yeah, that was a good time. Again, brought the CJ out there, pumped up the application for it to make it sound really, really good, really glowing. They took us and went out there and somehow kept ahead of everybody else, and at the end finished it. I was the first one to actually finish their Green Mile course that the last 2 did in every show.
Yep.
And so they really didn't know whether it could be done. They were pretty sketchy about whether that last hill was even safe and some other stuff. And I'm like, well, I'm the guy, right? If I can get there, I'll test it for you. And because if something happens, it's already happened to me at some point, probably. So it was fun. It was a really good experience, and to see some of the behind the scenes stuff, like that you don't even think about just being a wheeler. was really cool, like how an actual television production goes. Yeah. So,
Right. So there was a scene in there in that show, because I only watched even the second season. There was probably only 2 or 3 of the shows I actually watched because we don't have TV.
uh,
There was a scene in there where you looked over at the guy you were gonna race line up against or something, and he looked at you, and I don't know, it looked like there was a little animosity going on there during your episode.
that's all TV.
That was all TV. Okay,
That
good.
was the first course they put us on, and because of Pistol Pete, they let us walk that course beforehand. And I guess they had done the first 2 shows, they had used that course once and didn't let them walk it. And I mean, you could really get hurt. And Pistol's like, I don't want to be a part of it if you guys don't let these people know what's coming ahead. So again, a whole TV thing. They lined us on some other old course that they never used in that episode, had every camera ready and everybody ready, and then they said no, and they moved us over to that thing, and it was I can't remember what they called it now, bumps and jumps or something like that. We walked it, and there's 6 cars at that time. You go down this thing, and it clearly narrows all on one side. The side that me and the 2 other guys, I guess there's only 5 cars, me and the 2 other guys were going to be in, and the guy to my right, the side that if we were all down there at the same time was going to get, it was going to get narrow on us. A really nice truck. And, so we all kind of made a mental note of that. And I didn't have any idea I would be there. It was pick a guy to beat was my thing. So there's Mark in the rusty old Ford next to me. I'm like, you're the guy I'm picking to beat. I want to finish 4th and just get on to the next thing, right? Trying to be smart about it. Well, Mark passes me about 3/4 track. And I went, oh, no. So I just laid into it. And right about the same time I laid into it and got into the bumps, and we're all doing this, Mark's over here like rubbing my mirror, and the orange truck is in my peripheral vision too. So I'm thinking, well, if we're going to swap paint, it's going to be me and the rusty old Ford. I want to give this guy as much room as I can, but they played it up like, I said, oh, it's narrow down there. And they played it up like the guy was upset at me or whatever, but
Okay.
that wasn't the way it was. There was enough room.
Because I was the whole thing. It was like, that's not Jeff. That's not the Jeff I know. When they tried to play that game. But I understand how television goes.
Drama. We were in the other one too. Me and Trevor and Jack and Ori. This one that I'm wearing the shirt for, that is on YouTube right now. The Junkyard Challenge, and they played in a whole bunch more drama into that one than it was. I get it. It's TV, that there's audiences that somehow are still watching Survivor. So obviously there's people out there. It's just not me and you, right? We're watching it for the trucks and for the tech and whatever else.
Correct.
But they got to do their job, so we let them.
That's why, everybody was always, how come you never got it to TV? How come you never got it to TV? I wouldn't sell the sport out. We were approached by a lot of a lot of companies that said, really early too, American Chopper days, going, oh, well, it's Big Rich, Little Rich. This is just like the Tuttles. We can get some action going between you guys, and then with the competitors out on the, we can make this into a great show. And I'm like, you know what? We're not selling out. We're not going to make our people look like idiots. We're not going to allow ourselves to be edited and look like idiots. I used to have a line that every time one of these companies would call me, as I said, well, I'm not afraid to go to jail for my sport. And they were like, what do you mean? And I said, well, if you make us look like idiots in editing, I'm going to walk into your office and I'm going to kick your ass. And they were like, yeah, really? You would do that? And I said, yeah, I will. And so I remember talking to the lady that she had swamp people and ice road truckers, and they're always doing stuff. And I told her that, and she goes, you'd come into the office and hit a woman? And I said, no, but there's a man in your office that's going to take one for the team. We never got a call back on that.
You know, and I don't know if there would have been something that could have been done, but yeah, I mean, the crawling itself didn't really translate even to video well. If you were there watching it, it was impressive, but
Yes.
it was slow and precise. And even as soon as you put it on a screen or took a picture of it, it lost its depth and you couldn't really tell what it was. So you would have had to go broad audience, you know, you would have had to put the drama and all that stuff into it that all those shows had that I watched. And if it was, you know, one of these chopper shows or whatever, I'm just watching it still to this day just to drink in that one little tip that somebody, I still remember something that Jesse James did on Monster Garage. It was actually an old dude that taught Jesse James how to cut one of the flap discs to get inside of like a conical to be able to sand in this. I think they were Frenching in a antenna or something weird like that. And I went, yeah, cool tip like that. And that's whatever. That's probably 15 years ago. I still remember that one because nobody else, you know, shows that stuff. And the Junkyard Challenge, I felt like we had some really cool tech stuff that I would have liked to have seen included. You know, I'm not the guy that has to pay the bills for the TV show, so you know, they obviously know more about what the audience is than I do. But for guys like me and you, there was some neat stuff we did down there that I would have loved to have seen. And maybe they can broaden it. Maybe they can bring some of the tech from the show, you know, back out and put that on YouTube once they have people watching the show. But it was a good time too. We had a blast doing it and met a bunch of really great guys, and we did pretty well with that one too. Yeah.
Wow. So is there anything that we haven't hit upon that you want to share with us?
I don't know. I guess so I'm curious to see as you go through this history thing, because the older I get, the more, you know, more I enjoy history. And I really see, like we talked a minute about the 5 eras. So of four-wheeling in general, not just rock crawling and not just competing, but I'm curious if there's another perspective from another part of the world. I know the other day you and I talked about when we would read the magazines, you could tell if a Jeep was from the Pacific Northwest, right? Or you could tell if a Jeep was from Tellico in that area, basically just by looking at her. SoCal, you could look at the picture and see that. So I know there's a whole bunch of different versions of what I've noticed from a NorCal point of view. And so I'd love to give my perspective on how it all went down in general, and then be able to compare that to some other people, maybe Durham and whatever. But I saw it. I think the evolution of four-wheeling just follows the evolution of Jeeps. And obviously I'm a Jeep-centric guy, but you know, you got post-war. So all those guys wanted a Jeep. So we'll make a civilian Jeep. Then you've got what I consider the old man era. And this is when I was growing up. These were all the old men that had the flat fenders. And they were also that hot rod era, right? Very, very similar story with hot rodders. Post-war, guys were building stuff. So the old man era of flat fenders had, you know, the chrome and the multiple, you know, musical horns and the polished paint, and they were building it all themselves. They couldn't, you know, do anything. And if you wanted a chrome part, you took it to the chromer and got it chrome. So they painstakingly built their Jeeps, and they would, you know, build them up, power steering and a little bit of homemade lift and big tires. I remember my dad talking about tires. You know, the biggest tire you could get back in the 60s and early 70s was like, I don't know how big measured wise, but it was like an 11 or a 15.9 or 15.7 or something like that. So they would take a brand new tire. They would take their wheels, and I still have some of these, out to Champion Wheel and have them widened. They'd have a band welded into them. Then they would take their tires to Bruce's Recaps in Oakland, and you take a brand new tire, biggest you could get, and he could make it 2 inches wider and 2 inches taller by putting a fresh recap. And that was like whatever the cool recap was at the time, that was it, you know? So that was like, I should have been my dad's age. and that would have been my good era to be in. But I remember all those old guys in the club that did that. My dad was kind of one of them. So there was no reason for those guys to ever want to switch out of a flat fender, because they had their overdrive and they had their power steering and the thing worked like a clock, and you went and you did the Rubicon all perfect and you never scratched it, right? Or you might scratch it, but you weren't not driving the hard trails. And then you had, in kind of in the middle of the old man era, they didn't go away, you had like the disco era. So that's the third one to me. And it was, the monster trucks came out and everybody had the chrome roll bars with 14s and the crazy paint jobs, and they were all lifted too high. And so I think out of that became the junk Jeep era, which is like Rick Payway, Jimmy Nyland, Ned Bacon, around this area anyway, all those guys. And they hated chrome. Well, Nyland hated chrome because for different reasons, but and I think it was because they thought chrome meant you weren't running the hard lines, and they did. They started running more hard lines, and they were willing to scratch up their Jeeps and flip them on over and all this stuff. So they kind of were the start of the progression of when we started noticing it being competitive instead of just everybody getting through the trail and having a beer in camp, right? So the junk era sort of led to like the buggy build era and people building custom vehicles just to off-road and no body panels anymore. And that was all right in there with the online era and the Pirate 4x4. And, you know, guys, you could be completely unscrupulous and build a company just because you figured out how to do online sales of parts now. And this was a whole new thing right about the same time the TJ came around. So the TJ was a huge turning point, because if you think about it, all those old dudes, they weren't going to buy a YJ for the previous 10 years with square headlights. God no, there was no reason for them to buy any of the CJs when they came out, or the 5s and the 7s. You know, they were too big for the trail and all that in that era. And now all of a sudden the trails had changed a little bit, and the TJ was comfortable on road, and you could make it really quick off-road capable, and you didn't have to flat tow your Jeep up to the Rubicon anymore. And they went, and they had the money. So that was the first Jeep they bought after building up flat fenders from 30 and 40 years earlier.
Right.
And interestingly enough, the TJ was also the first vehicle in history that you could buy aftermarket parts for before you could go to your dealer and get that Jeep, right? Because smart, they sent them all out. Companies like Skyjacker and everybody, and they would build lifts and parts and stuff for them before you could buy them. And then because of the whole online presence with Pirate 4x4 and everything, everybody was sharing ideas. So if you came up with a gizmo and a gadget, somebody else built it, you know, and pumped it out in mass production, which gave root to the online sales, you know, guys. So now you could just click and order all these parts and have somebody else build your TJ, and it was badass vehicle. And then I think the only other era beyond that we've seen is like the MyFace and Instagrams and all this stuff, where it just seems like the wallet jobs of the JKs and the JLs, and they go straight from the dealer down to $80,000 worth of upgrades. But I think those guys have lost a lot of the, like, there's guys out there that are doing that, and you see them on the trail and they think they invented it last week, you know. And
they have so many of those, if they never drove a TJ or a CJ, they really don't have the background skills to take a vehicle without lockers and without big tires and drive through the trail.
And it's just not even just the driving skills. When something breaks, what do you do?
Right.
And when you need a complex extraction, what do you do? And who do you call and everything? If they can't call AAA, you know, and I'm not saying all of them, but there's so many of them now. It's just exploded. It's, you know, I really think what you're doing is pretty important. So hopefully these guys will spend a minute and realize there's more depth to it, and understand the the history of it all and how important it is. And that should get them also interested in conservation and keeping these trails open and fighting what we've been fighting for as long as we've been fighting it, you know?
True. Well, I want to thank you for coming on board and having this conversation with me and sharing your history and your perspectives and everything that that you've done through the years. And especially I want to thank you personally for the things that you've done for me. I mean, just being there, being at the events, being a sounding board, telling me, Rich, that rule is stupid, you know, do this, do that, you know, sending me only a $700 bill when that bill probably should have been closer to $3 or $4 grand. I appreciate your friendship over the years. You know, thank you so much for spending the time and sharing your history.
Well, likewise, and I appreciate you and all you did that I don't even know about as far as putting together all these things that I can show up to with 3 minutes left in tech. And, you know, and I can't even fathom some of the stuff you had to chase down and invent along the way. And yeah, it's been fun. It's been really great, good times. And that's another thing that I kind of would like to talk about, what I guess is, you mentioned the campfires and having a beer after all these events and everything. And when it kind of grew out of that, it wasn't as much fun for me anymore. And it had to be fun or I'm not doing it. I
Right.
couldn't justify it. I could have always spent as much as I wanted to and climb the ladder, but I always had to make it justifiable. And that was really important to me. And, balance everything else out with it. And, you know, just, yeah, being friends with you and watching your family grow and little Rich and everything he's done now, it's been awesome. It's been, we really got the heyday of it, I feel like, and we're going to keep going.
I believe so. I mean, everybody goes, oh, those were the good old days. And I keep telling everybody, it's still good. It's still good for me. I understand that people transition luckily I did so much transitioning before I started putting on the rock crawls that this was my final transition until I decided to retire and not put on events anymore. But that's the reason we're doing this, the podcast. And that's why we're doing the magazine is, those are my retirement plans. COVID, of course, probably now is got me to where I'm going to have to do a couple of more years, longer than what I expected. But, being 62 now and been doing this for 20 years, you do the math, I'm not going to do it when I'm 82, at least climbing around on the rocks, carrying cones and delineator bases and all that kind of stuff. If I figure out a way to have a crew with me, it'd be a different story. I'd do this until the day they start shoveling dirt in my face. But
you get to watch what Little Rich is doing and all his cool stuff with Trail Hero and everything.
Exactly.
And it's another evolution of it, and to be able to see what's going on with King of the Hammers, and who knows what comes up next. But it's been a ride. I mean, I wouldn't trade a minute of it for anything. We had such a great time and learned so much and did so much. I've already lived a whole life and a half. And as far as doing all this stuff, and they say the regrets are only the things that you never did do. Well, I don't have a whole list of those things that we didn't get to do, and I'm still looking forward to new stuff. So, yeah, it's going to be awesome.
I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your time here today, and I can't wait to get this one edited and up there. I'll let you know when that happens, so you can share it among your family and friends. And again, Jeff, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Rich. Have a good one. Next time we'll have this interview at Grandpa's garage with a beer and a campfire.
We'll make sure that happens at the next Easter Jeep Safari.
Right on.
If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.